So welcome back to the studio, and it's part 2 of the sea turtle painting. Now we've still got a lot to do. I've got to paint the reef, maybe put some nice lighting effects in there, some rays of light through the water, so there's lots of little details to watch. So make sure you watch the video all the way through, right to the very end. It's packed full of top tips as usual, and maybe the odd little pickle, but not too bad, I hope. Anyway, you know the routine. Sit back, comfy chair, maybe a nice long cool drink, and watch me paint the second part of the sea turtle painting. Happy painting, people. So here's my sea turtle. It's been a few days since I painted anything. As you can see, the oil paint is, well, almost completely dry. But time to work on this coral reef, and I've got a lovely reference photograph. I'm sort of going to mimic some of these shapes, and to do it I'm going to be using some acrylics. I'll put a list down below in the description. I'll be using a couple of synthetic brushes as before. I just want to try and get in some nice basic shapes to start with. These background ones I'm just going to leave dark and shadowy. It creates depth and distance in my painting. These ones in the foreground I'm going to make a little brighter. To start with, I'm just going to mix some white with 2 or 3 of these colours. So white and turquoise. Let's have a look at that colour. That looks really rather nice, doesn't it? I'll also be mixing some white with some magenta and white with some orange. If I add a touch of magenta to that colour, I get a nice sort of fleshy pink colour. As I mentioned before, if you don't have acrylics available, this entire step could be done with oils. It just takes a little longer to dry. There's that nice fleshy pink colour I was looking for. I think I'm going to try and do this section first, and I'm just going to use little short strokes here. I just want to sort of get the sort of shape right to start with. Now, one thing you will notice with acrylics is that once they've been painted and left to dry for a few minutes, they start to become, well, sort of dull. They lose a little bit of colour. So you'll see that this is the first of 2 stages. I come back and add a little more sparkle later on. I'll use a little bit of time lapse here. I vary my colours as I go. I might add more orange or more magenta. I just do it to taste. For this piece of coral, I just wash my brush and go into my magenta and white mixture. Again, I vary my colours a lot. As my brush runs out of paint, so I work on the slightly more shadowy areas at the base of the coral, where less light is likely to be hitting. Don't forget, vary the angles of the strokes as well. As I come down to the base of the coral, I tend to brush almost upwards. It gives it that sort of nice rounded shape. I've made a nice sort of lavender colour here with some blue and magenta. I've also added a little bit of bright mauve colour as well to my plate. I want to make this look more like it's like a small tree with lots of branches on it. The shapes and forms and colours of coral are amazing. There are so many varieties, including ones that look like brains. I'll have a go at painting one of those as well. Now for some nice greens. I got some yellow and some blue on my plate. I'll mix them together, and I'm using the small flat brush for this step. I want to create some nice grasses. I think they're called eelgrass. These long fronds of grass waft backwards and forwards on the tide. They provide great cover for little marine animals. You'll notice as I come down, I both open and close the brush to create a nice sort of ribbon effect. The more you do, the better at it you get, and you can just add a whole bunch of them. As you see, I go backwards and forwards with my brush, opening it and closing it. I let the paint run out just as it reaches the base of the corals. Later on, we'll come back and we'll enhance them with a few more brush strokes. Right now, I'm just having fun. I've gone a bit mad with the yellow for this stroke. Yes, definitely a bit too bright yellow. I'll go back over it with a little bit more green just to calm it down a touch, but maybe just go through the centre and leave those bright yellow edges. That looks quite nice, doesn't it? I'll leave this area dark as a nice contrast against those eelgrasses. Now, let's just push in some nice green coloration here. Again, nothing particularly special in terms of a stroke, just sort of a stabbing action. This is where I'm going to be painting some brain coral. Well, I hope I'm going to get some brains anyway. I need all the help I can get. So here's my canvas about half an hour later, and as you can see, some of these colours have dulled slightly. I'm just going to go back over them with a few brighter colours, maybe a touch more white and yellow here. You'll notice, as I do, these become a little bit more three-dimensional. I fill in a few of the gaps and try to make them look a little less regular. I brighten up the rest of my corals. You can see how much brighter and lovely they look now. I'll go back down a couple of these eelgrasses with a touch of a bright limey green colour, just to add a little bit more detail to the edges. Now, time to turn our attention to this part of the painting. It's the underside of the sea. I've put out some fresh colours, white, a couple of the blue colours that I used before, that's Ultramarine, and some cobalt blue, a touch of turquoise and some Paynes Grey. I make a nice pale blue colour to start with. I wanted to concentrate in this sort of area of my painting, and this is for the most distant parts of my waves. Remember, we're painting the underside of the waves. They actually look very much like the waves seen from above. I start off with some pale colours, and again, a nice little sort of dipping action here. Just paint some nice loose strokes. You don't have to be too accurate with this. Just remember that the darker colours are at the extreme top of the canvas and the light colours should be sort of disappearing off into the distance. As you see, I'm now mixing some Paynes Grey into my colour. I want this to be the darkest of the wave shapes. I'll be keeping this at the very, very top edge of my painting. I let some of the previous blue colours peek through here and there. I'll add a little to the right hand side too, but I'm going to sort of keep sort of somewhere to the middle right, a little more open. I think that's where my rays of light might be coming through onto the top of my sea turtle. I'll use a little bit of time lapse here. I let the acrylic paint dry completely before I move on to working in oils again. I'm going to continue using water mixable oils for this stage. As you see, it's the same palette I used previously. I have freshened up my titanium white a little bit, that's all. Again, I'm using those sort of short stumpy synthetic brushes. I've mixed a small amount of white and turquoise together, and I'm going to paint some sort of small dappled lighting effects on the water. This is called Bokeh. Well, I think that's how you pronounce it. And it is just a random series of dots of light. These ones I want to be quite sort of soft and indistinct. If they're too bright, I'll just take my finger and rub them over the surface of the painting. Try and keep them nice and random. Remember, this is light striking the surface of the water, and it is quite soft. I'll go back in a second and add some brighter ones. And for this, I'm going to use a cotton bud, my old favourite to paint with. These ones want to be, well, a little brighter, maybe a little more defined. Overlap them with the slightly less defined, softer shapes that I just painted. I'm also using a little bit more bright colour. As you see, I try and get a sort of almost like a ring with a slightly pale centre to it. It takes a little practice, but you can achieve some lovely painting effects with this. It does take time though, and you want to add lots of them to make it work. I'll do some more time lapse through this section. If you enjoy watching my tutorials and you want to support my channel, don't forget, give this little painting a like. If you're not subscribed, you can subscribe to the channel, it doesn't cost a penny. If you subscribe, don't forget, ring the little bell icon. It means when I drop a new video on the channel, you get a little reminder. Thank you. Now for some rays of sunlight falling on the back of my little sea turtle. I pick a point where I think the light will be coming through, and with just a small amount of paint on my brush, I just want to map out the position. I don't want to get in a pickle at this stage. As you see, I just touch and drag it towards the sea turtle, leaving just a faint trace of light. When those little rays of light come through the water in the background, I want some of there as well. I might make these a little less defined, a little softer. When they come through the water, I just want to add them slightly brighter. Just there. I'll do the same effect on the foreground rays of light as well, just to brighten the entry point. It makes a big difference to the finished effect. Time to add a little bit of sheen to the top of the sea turtle in this area, and maybe to the top of their head. This has been painted a few days now, so it's started to dry. Make sure that that colour has dried enough, because again we're using the dry brushing technique. If that nice orangey brown colour is just a bit damp, then these colours will blend. Now you might remember I mentioned that the titanium white colour is actually not terribly opaque, and as you see, by applying it dry, I still keep a little bit of that nice orangey brown colour coming through, but I also get a nice effect. Looks like sheen or shine on the turtle's back. I'll do a few random strokes as well, give the effect of dappled light. I'll also add a little bit of shimmer and shine to the top of the head. There. As my sea turtle glides over the coral, it's going to cast a shadow. And for this I'm using some Paynes Grey. Just neat, nothing else mixed into it. And once again I'm using this dry. This is a glazing technique. Remember, I call Paynes Grey a chameleon colour, because when you put it over the top of another colour, it dulls it straight away. It creates an immediate shadow. It's one of my favourite colours to use for this particular technique. I'll also use a little bit on some of the other coral as well, including that green brain coral. I did manage to paint some, but of course, brain coral, I forgot to film it. Never mind, but there it is, just about to be greyed out. Final stages. Stand back and have a look at your sea turtle and see if there's any last minute touches. Maybe deepen a shadow here and there. And I think with that, my little painting is complete. So there you have it. A lovely sea turtle for you to paint with some special light effects as well. Do you like that bokeh effect? It's a lot of fun, but you do need to persevere with it to make it work really well. But in the meantime, there's another lovely seascape painting for you to watch next. Happy painting, people!